Okay, hello and welcome Year 9 to Lesson 14 from Romeo and Juliet. Okay, we have 4 characters, 3 men, 1 woman. What is the relationship between each of the characters? Do you recognise who is who? Who probably is the youngest? I think we can safely say that's Juliet at 13. Lord Capulet, of course, is her father. Paris is her suitor, asking Lord Capulet for Juliet's hand in marriage, and Romeo, of course, is the love of her life. Now, I'm sure that there's more to say between the relationship of each of these, but have all the characters got a relationship with each other? Does Romeo, for example, have anything to do with Paris? Does Lord Capulet have anything to do with Romeo? So ask yourself what the relationship is between these, and then we'll have a look to see which relationships cause tension or conflict in the play. Well, we know Lord Capulet is Juliet's father. Paris is his friend, and he has given permission for Paris to marry Juliet. Romeo is a Montague, his family's sworn enemy. Juliet is Lord Capulet's daughter. She is in love with and married to Romeo, and she knows that, well, this is dreadful, she knows that Paris intends to marry her. So we have an immediate obstacle here with the potential for a bigamous marriage. Romeo is married to Juliet, but as a Montague, he is in a feud with Lord Capulet. He does not know of Paris's intention to marry Juliet, but he's not an enemy of Paris. You can see how the tragedy is building up. Now, Paris is not a Montague or a Capulet. He is merely friends with Lord Capulet. He wants to marry Juliet because, of course, he stands to gain great wealth and power and respect, but he doesn't know Romeo well. Now here you can see an extraordinarily large boulder in the road, which I think we can safely say is an obstacle to the progress of the journey. And one of the obstacles, and there are many in this play, are of course, or is the ongoing feud between the Montagues and the Capulets. Well, now of course we're going to read about another very sizable obstacle that is going to get in the way of their happy marriage. Can you guess what that obstacle is going to be? Now, what you need to remember is that nobody knows that Romeo and Juliet have got married in secret. And to complicate matters, this marital scene of love and harmony was juxtaposed with a very prolonged fighting scene in Act 3, Scene 1, in which Romeo has killed Tybalt, and Tybalt is, of course, Juliet's cousin and a Capulet. So I wonder if you can remember the word that links the two scenes when they are deliberately contrasted by a writer in order to explore the differences further. And you would be right in thinking it's juxtaposition. So we've got numerous obstacles here that are building up. We've got a death in the Capulet family caused by a Montague. We've got a secret marriage. We've got the proposal of another marriage to ensue. This is all getting very complicated. And Romeo, of course, now is related to Tybalt by marriage. So he's actually killed his cousin-in-law. Crumbs, how is it going to end? Well, in the next scene, we're going to look at Lord and Lady Capulet and Paris discussing Paris marrying Juliet, which of course is to happen shortly, and we'll read Act 3, Scene 4 together. Now you won't have this in your booklet, but I have provided it on the PowerPoint. So we have the stage direction in brackets, enter Capulet, Lady Capulet and Paris. So there are our 3 main characters, Lord and Lady Capulet, and of course Paris with the peculiar hat, who is the suitor for Juliet's hand in marriage. And of course, they're having to deal with this dreadful aftermath of the slaying of Tybalt in a public street. Things have fallen out, sir, so unluckily that we have had no time to move our daughter. Look you, she loved her kinsman Tybalt dearly, and so did I. Well, we were born to die. 'Tis very late. She'll not come down tonight, I promise you. But for your company, I would have been in bed an hour ago. So Capulet, this is obviously late at night, and Paris presumably has called to the Capulet household to see Juliet after this terrible tragedy, probably to pay his respects and grievances, condolences. And Capulet makes it very clear that Juliet loved her kinsman. He was part of the family dearly. And so she's bound to be sobbing in her bedchamber. And he's saying, as it is so late, she'll not come down tonight. And he's even stressing the fact that but for Paris calling on his household, he would have been tucked up in bed an hour earlier. These times of woe afford no time to woo. Madam, good night. Commend me to your daughter. So Paris is saying, please give Juliet my respects, tell her that I've called, and he's acknowledging times of woe, times of great agony and grief afford no time for courtship to woo. So he's treading on very delicate ground because, of course, he's still very intent on marrying Juliet. I will, says Lady Capulet, and know her mind early tomorrow. Tonight she is mewed up to her heaviness. And there is another clue that rather like a falcon who's been tied up to a perch, Juliet, it's a hunting imagery. Juliet is tied up, as it were, not literally, but in her bedroom, and she is obviously feeling the grief of Tybalt's passing. But Lady Capulet says, I will find out what she thinks about your suit early tomorrow. So she says, I will know her mind early tomorrow. And Capulet finishes by saying, Sir Paris, I will make a desperate tender of my child's love. I think she will be ruled in all respects by me. Nay, more, I doubt it not. Wife, go you to her ere you go to bed, acquaint her here of my son Paris's love, and bid her, mark you me, on Wednesday next. But soft, what day is this? So it looks as though Capulet is stepping forward. He's so confident that Juliet is going to marry Paris. He says, I will make a desperate tender of my child's love. I'll speak for Juliet. I think, he says, she will be ruled in all respects by me. I am her father and I have authority over her. And he says, no more, I doubt it not. In other words, Juliet will be the meek, obedient, submissive daughter that we all saw at the beginning of the play. The problem is we've seen a very different and much more proactive side to Juliet, of a confident, assertive, proactive young woman that has grasped her chance of happiness with both hands. Now he's giving his wife instructions. Note how he talks to her wife. Go you to Juliet before you go to bed and let her know, acquaint her here of my son Paris's love. So he's already almost adopted Paris as the son-in-law, of course, that he's going to be, and bid her. And then he has to stop for a moment to think about what day it is today. Monday, my lord, says Paris. Monday, ha-ha. Well, Wednesday is too soon. On Thursday, let it be. On Thursday, tell her, she shall be married to this noble earl. So Juliet is literally being told by her father that the wedding is to be in 3 days' time. So the clock is ticking. Will you be ready, he says to Paris. Do you like this haste? We'll keep no great ado, a friend or two, for hark you, Tybalt being slain so late, it may be thought we held him carelessly, being our kinsman, if we revel much. Therefore we'll have some 6 friends, and there an end. But what say you to Thursday? My lord, I would that Thursday were tomorrow. Well, get you gone. On Thursday be it, then. Oh dear, and you can see the fuse has been lit. We now have a very volatile, explosive situation and we literally have a ticking time bomb. Now let's just see what Capulet's been saying to Paris. He's saying, will you be ready in time if we bring the marriage forward to Thursday, literally in 3 days' time? Do you like this haste? And he says, we'll not make a great fuss. We're not going to have a huge party with hundreds and hundreds of guests, merely a friend or two, because Tybalt being slain so late, you know, he's only just been horrendously slaughtered. It may be thought that we're not paying him the respects that he is due if we party too much, if we revel too much. Therefore, he says, it's going to be a very quiet marriage with perhaps just half a dozen friends, and there an end. So what say you to Thursday? And Paris, of course, is very keen and says, I wish that Thursday were tomorrow. So Paris would marry Juliet in a second if he could. And finally, he turns to his wife and says to Paris, get you gone, on Thursday be it then, and to Lady Capulet, go you to Juliet ere you go to bed, prepare her wife against this wedding day. Farewell, my lord. Light to my chamber, ho, afore me. It is so very, very late that we may call it early by and by. Good night. And so you can see the mask of tragedy there. You can see the wedding rings, which of course have already been exchanged. And we theoretically have another set of wedding rings that are supposed to be being exchanged, and we only have 3 days to go. So Juliet is going to receive this news literally on the day of Tybalt's murder, that she is to marry Paris in 3 days' time. And one other question I'd like to ask you, does Juliet know who's responsible yet for Tybalt's death? And you can see how a very explosive situation is building up. So, which of the following sentences best summarise this scene? 1. Lady Capulet refuses to talk about Paris and Juliet marrying because she is too upset or distraught about Tybalt's death. 2. Paris says he does want to marry Juliet anymore. He does want to marry Juliet. 3. Lord Capulet says that Juliet will do what he tells her to do. 4. A wedding date is set. In 3 days' time, Paris will marry Juliet. And 5. Lord and Lady Capulet will make arrangements for a large and expensive wedding to take place. And you'd be right in thinking the answers are 3 and 4. Okay, now your next job is to see if you can find 2 sets of lines that will best represent the statement. So let's have a look at number 3. Lord Capulet says Juliet will do what he tells her to, and a wedding date is set. Well, I appreciate you haven't got the script in front of you, so let's have a look at the lines that we've got here. Okay, I think she will be ruled in all respects by me. No more. I doubt it not, or nay more. So Juliet is going to do what he tells her to because she is an obedient daughter. And the wedding date is set in 3 days' time. On Thursday, let it be. On Thursday, tell her she shall be married to this noble earl. And those words, noble and earl, remind us that Paris is a man of some social standing and wealth, and he's very handsome, and he is an extremely good prize for Juliet. So let's just have a look at this first statement in more detail. Lord Capulet says that Juliet will do what he tells her to do. And it's here that we really need to look at the context of life in the 15th and the 16th century and what life was like for women in a patriarchal society in which men had the power. And so now you need to look in your booklet at this extract, which talks about what it was like to be a daughter in Shakespeare's time. And the heading is Dreams, Duty and Defiance. And you can see in the sort of wood carving there, you've got the proud father very much in charge on the biggest chair, and the wife sitting very dutifully with the children either side. So let's read this through together. A number of Shakespeare's plays show daughters negotiating the demands of their fathers, often trying to reconcile duty with a desire for independence. Kim Ballard discusses women's obligations to the men in their lives during the Elizabethan era. Shakespeare created not only complex and engaging female roles, but also many memorable parent-child relationships. A significant number of these relationships involve fathers and daughters. Interestingly, mothers are often absent from the drama, throwing the daughter-father relationship into sharp relief. A father of two daughters himself, Shakespeare's dramatic daughters make a formidable lineup of young women, most of them at a transitional stage between the protection of their childhood home and an adult life beyond it. The transition is rarely a smooth one. In both comedies and tragedies, tension rises as daughters go in search of love, adventure, and independence. Romeo and Juliet may be a love story, but a daughter-father relationship lies at the heart of the play's events. Juliet is not yet 14 when the young nobleman Paris approaches her father Capulet for permission to woo his daughter. At first, Capulet seems protective of Juliet, his only surviving child, and proposes that 2 more summers should pass before we may think her ripe to be a bride. But Paris is a good prospect, a relative of the Prince of Verona, so Capulet agrees to Paris's request, inviting him to a family feast that very evening, which Juliet will be attending. In Shakespeare's time, daughters of respectable families like Juliet could expect their fathers to have a significant involvement in choosing their future husband. This reflected the subordinate, the less important position of women in a society at the time, and particularly the traditional view that daughters were a commodity, an object, and could be used in marriage to create useful alliances. Paternal involvement in husband selection provided material for many of Shakespeare's plays, and he makes dramatic use of the resulting family clashes. Initially, Capulet is seemingly kinder than many fathers in allowing Juliet some say over her future husband. But woo her, gentle Paris, get her heart. My will to her consent is but a part. Later in the play, however, when the family is in shock after their kinsman Tybalt has been murdered, Capulet leaps ahead and sets an early date for the wedding without consulting his daughter first. I think she will be ruled in all respects by me, he comments, clearly expecting Juliet to be obedient. The obedient way young women of the 16th century were meant to behave towards their parents was not only reflected in religious teaching, but also well documented in publications known as conduct books. Does this sound familiar to the life of Jane Eyre? At the beginning of the play, Lady Capulet, sent to speak to Juliet by her husband, tells Juliet about Paris's interest in her and encourages her to consider him. And Juliet's reply exemplifies the behaviour expected of her. I'll look to like, if looking liking move, but no more deep will I endart mine eye than your consent gives strength to make it fly. In other words, I will look at Paris, and I'll look to see if I could love him, but I won't go any further than that without your permission or your consent, giving it strength to make my feelings fly. Unfortunately, Juliet's dutiful words are soon forgotten. When overcome by her warm, youthful blood, she falls in love with Romeo, the son of her father's enemy, and marries him in secret. Time and again, Shakespeare's plays dramatise the conflict between the status quo in which fathers chose husband for their daughters and the new order in which daughters wished to choose their own mates based on affection. A Midsummer Night's Dream opens with Aegeus demanding that his daughter Hermia either marry Demetrius, the husband he has selected for her, or be put to death, while Hermia remains steadfastly committed to Lysander, the prospective husband that she has chosen. It's part of Juliet's tragedy that she's unable to tell her authoritarian father about her marriage to Romeo, even though she could express her love with an eloquence that could overcome anger and hatred. Capulet is determined to give her to Paris, a father's right, even enshrined in the marriage ceremony. After seeing their daughters married off to the husband of their choosing, the relationship between a father and a daughter would grow more distant. They have, after all, given their daughter away in marriage. The child is no longer theirs. Rather, the woman is now the husband's. He is now the superior influence in her life. The Christian scholar John Knox summarised the age's attitudes to women. Woman, in her greatest perfection, was made to serve and obey man, not to rule and command him. However, the triumphant rule of Elizabeth I marked the beginning of a change in these opinions. Indeed, Shakespeare can be seen to challenge these viewpoints with his strong, confident and defiant female characters. And I always have a sneaking feeling that Shakespeare actually was far more of a realist, and I think he probably sparred with some very strong female personalities in his own life to portray them so wonderfully in his plays. Now, I'm going to, or you can pause the video whilst you make a few notes on the following questions. How does this article help you to understand the way Lord Capulet talks about Juliet to Paris? You know, she will do what I tell her. She is my daughter. She will obey me. How has the information of the article affected your opinion of Juliet? Crumbs. Let's just think for a minute of the Juliet we saw in the balcony scene, the Juliet declaring her feelings for Romeo. If your intention be honourable, she proposes marriage. She's direct, she's assertive, she's passionate, she's strong. Crumbs, but she forgot all about her father's permission. And how does this article relate to the father-daughter relationships that we've already studied? For example, Aegeus and Hermia in A Midsummer Night's Dream, and Prospero and Miranda in The Tempest. Now, finally, there is more writing, I have to say, in this week, because we're just before half term, and I think it is important that you all have a go at writing a C's response to this question. Sorry, that was my phone just tinkling away there. So how does Shakespeare present Lord Capulet in Romeo and Juliet? Now, you need to think about what your opening sentence is going to be, your main idea that you're going to talk about throughout your essay. And we call that a thesis. So essentially, it's going to be your answer to the question, but condensed into one short, powerful sentence. So you really need to think about whether you agree with these two views of Lord Capulet. Do you feel, A, that he is a possessive and cruel father who's only interested in making Juliet do what he wants? Or B, a father who's actually trying to look after his daughter and arrange a marriage that will be good for her? And you really do need to consider the context for your answer, because it's very, very important to understand how the relationship between father and daughter was much more formal in those days than it is today. So once you've decided what your thesis, your main idea, your main response is going to be, this is how you would structure your paragraphs. So you obviously need to make a statement. So how does Shakespeare present Lord Capulet in Romeo and Juliet? You might want to say Shakespeare presents Lord Capulet as a commanding, but caring father, if that is your opinion. Then you need your evidence. So you need to describe a moment from the play that is going to help you to show that your main idea is valid. So you describe a moment from the play and then pin it down with a quotation to support your idea. The next part of the paragraph is to explore how the quotation supports your idea and your thinking. To see if what I call, these are value for money quotes. You don't want to quote and then have the quote just repeat your point. You want to explore what the quote tells you about the world of Capulet and the world of Juliet, and then finally to explore the historical context of the time, which will add a lot more sophistication to your argument. So let's have a look at an example. Lord Capulet is, so we've got a nice statement coming up, a possessive and mean father who treats Juliet like a possession rather than a person that he cares about. Okay, so this is a very negative view of Lord Capulet. He's treating Juliet like an object who is going to be transported from the father's household to the household of Paris. What moment in the play is going to support this? He repeatedly promises Paris that he can marry his daughter, despite the fact that he has not discussed the matter with Juliet. And I really feel like taking a big gulp at this point, because this is not going to go well. Let's see if we can provide a quotation to further support what we're saying. He is certain that Juliet will accept his commands as, quote, she will be ruled in all respects by me. And there we have your reference. You've got Act 3, Scene 4, lines 13 to 14. You don't always have to put in the act and scene reference, but certainly he is convinced that Juliet will be ruled. Notice that word, ruled, in every respect by me. Now let's have a look at that quotation a bit further. And this is the interesting bit. This is where your thinking comes into it. Lord Capulet thinks he can decide on every aspect of Juliet's life. He doesn't care about what she feels, or if she loves, or even likes Paris. Instead, all respects of her life are decided without consulting her opinion at all. In this way, he is a tyrant, forcing her to do what he wants. This is a very negative view of Lord Capulet, and it perhaps doesn't quite take into account the context of the time. So let's finish with number 5. Even though it would be common for a father to arrange the wedding of his daughter in the Elizabethan era, the way he confidently tells Paris that Juliet will obey him shows his arrogance. Perhaps he thinks that Juliet's obedience will be attractive to Paris, which is why Lord Capulet brags of this so openly. So there you have a model example of what we would call a C's paragraph. It's trying to show you how to write an analytical paragraph for an academic piece of writing. Oh, we've got some more, sorry. However, let's see, where were we now? Lord Capulet does not know he's making a promise that he cannot fulfill. Juliet has already run off and married Romeo, her true love. This highlights how little Lord Capulet knows his daughter and makes it more obvious to the audience that he has no right to make decisions on her behalf. Wow, what an amazing paragraph that is. There's lots of detail in there, lots of evidence and lots of thinking that explores the characterization and also the effect on the audience. So it's very important to remember that you're talking about a play with an audience. Okay, so this is your chance to have a go at writing your answer to this question. Now, this will be hard for probably quite a few of you. So what I suggest you do is you follow the bulleted numbers, and then if you get stuck, email your teacher and just say, can you please give me a little prompt as to how I would continue? But try and explain your answer to the question. How do you feel Lord Capulet comes across in Romeo and Juliet? Is he an arrogant father? Is he a hard, vicious, controlling parent? Is he perhaps a bit misguided? Is he acting in what he thinks is in Juliet's best interests? Because this, after all, is a prestigious match and would be very, very good for Juliet. So explain, make sure you know what you think, and that's going to provide your opening line. Describe then a moment from the play that helps you to prove your idea. And so, yeah, go back at the PowerPoint, have a look at what Lord Capulet says to Paris, and look at how many times he says to Paris, you can, you know, she will definitely marry you. And remember that all the time this dialogue is going on, Juliet has no idea what's being discussed because she's upstairs in her room. Provide a quotation to support your ideas, and then explore. Let me know what your thinking is, and also add in a little bit about the historical context of the time to add sophistication to your argument. So finally, it's been a long lesson, but hopefully an enjoyable one. Which statements about the role of women in the Elizabethan era are correct? Does Juliet act like a typical Elizabethan woman? Or is it true that women had to obey their father or the eldest man in the household until they were married? Women in the Elizabethan era had to be obedient until they were married. After that, they could be completely independent. Or in the Elizabethan era, fathers did not care if their daughters were happy or not. Or fathers often chose their daughter's husband to make their families richer and more powerful. And notice you've got to choose more than one statement. And of course, you can pause the slide to make up your mind, and then the answer will be here. You had to obey your father or your eldest brother until you were married, and then of course you had to obey your husband, and often it was a business transaction as much as, well, it was an alliance. It was a business alliance of wealth and power and money, and the idea was their families could get more wealthy and more powerful. So that was a long lesson, so well done. You've got the storyboard to produce from the previous PowerPoint, and you've now got the opportunity to produce a C's paragraph, which I would like you to send to your teacher. If your teacher wants you to email them, do so. If they'd rather you sent it through Show My Homework, then by all means use the normal conduit for communicating with your teacher. But well done.